Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and today I'm very excited to have Patrick Porter with us. Dr. Patrick K. Porter, PhD, is an award-winning author and speaker and the founder of BrainTap, the leader in technology-enhanced meditation. Dr. Porter pioneered the use of brainwave entrainment to improve clarity, sleep, and energy, and remains at the forefront of scientific research. He founded BrainTap with the goal of making this technology accessible to everyone. BrainTap offers over 1,000 original audio sessions in 12 languages and serves a worldwide user base with its mobile app and headset. Dr. Porter's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, People, Entrepreneur Inc., and on ABC, NBC, CBS as an expert in brain health and wellness. And in 2020, Dr. Porter received the IAFNR Lifetime Achievement Award. Patrick, it's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Stephan. Thank you.
Well, first of all, let's help our listener or viewer understand a bit more about technology-enhanced meditation. Why not just sit on a rock somewhere and meditate without any technology anywhere nearby?
You can do it yourself if you have 30 years to meditate. And the problem is that we have this, what's called a monkey mind by most people, and they don't understand that meditation isn't just closing your eyes and falling asleep. A lot of people do that. When in our 30 years of scanning people, in the last 10 years, we've had technology that where we can actually do live readings with people. And what we find is that most people, when they meditate, actually stress their body out because their best thinking gave them the idea, hey, I'm going to start meditating. But unfortunately, their best thinking, most people, their inner conversation is 80% negative. So we need to upgrade that thinking, get them working better. And when you get, there are assistants where even, let's say, ancient technologies like candle burning, when somebody stares at a candle, they're actually using a form of frequency following response because that candle flickers at 10 hertz frequency, which just happens to be alpha. So you can use music, which is also a technology enhanced meditation. In fact, they used to use singing bowls to create what's called binaural beats. They'd put different size bowls on each side of the head and help people who had mental disorders, even in ancient times. So we're taking ancient technology that they've used to accelerate the meditation process, but we've basically put it on supercharge using technology.
Right. And so how did you come up with this and how does it all work?
Yeah. Well, I came up with it because my dad, when I was younger, he got help using a process called the Silva method, and then he became an instructor. So I've been teaching or using it since I was 12 years old. And because of my interest in electronics, my undergraduate degree is electronics. When I went to work for a company called Light and Sound Research, we put together, this was way back in the 80s, when the EEPROM chip, which is the first computer processing chip, came out. We were basically imitating what I was doing behind the scenes, doing biofeedback. There was no neurofeedback then. So if people are listening going, well, why didn't they just do this or that? Well, we didn't have that technology. And so we were looking at skin temperature, which is a sign of alpha, theta waves, breath, respiration. And so we were monitoring all this. And then we realized, hey, when they got into this state of alpha, pain would go away. So that's really what started us on the journey. And then we said, wow, when you're in this pain-free state, look at all these other things. And hey, this looks a lot like meditation, because people, their breathing would become rhythmic. It's almost a lot like also prayer. When you look at the physiological state, I'm not saying the psychological state. Of course, those are two different things when you're praying or when you're meditating. But the physiological state, really, there's not much difference. So within our research, we started finding, hey, when somebody downregulates their stress hormones or their fight or flight, all these beautiful things start happening in the body, and our nervous system is self-healing. So if we can relax the nervous system, it can heal itself. And what I mean by that is your brain, because 70% of your nervous system exists between your ears. And so we need to get the brain and body working together.
Got it. And if you could quantify, which I'm sure you can because you've done lots of research and studies, if you could quantify the benefits of doing these sorts of technologies in combination with quieting that monkey mind, what is the impact tangibly on sleep and on performance and
Sure.
stamina?
Yeah, those are pretty incredible. Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about a few studies, but they can go to braintapresearch.com. We have 11 universities concurrently doing studies on the brain right now. We'll talk about a few of them today, I'm sure. But the biggest thing we've noticed is just take, for instance, the Seminole College girls golf team. They won the national championship. These were elite athletes to begin with. But when we did our study with BrainTap, we wanted to see, could we improve their focus, their concentration? Now, it's easy to improve a C student, but what about an A student? And we did. We improved their alpha focus and concentration by 380%. That is out the door incredible. So when you think about that, means their reorganization score. Golf is played in about 5 minutes, but you're on the course for 4 hours. So the whole key is when you're addressing the ball and you have to be focused, can you reorganize and focus? So that's one of the things, being more present. The biggest thing we find with sleep, we just finished a study that's going to be published here from Australia, Western Australia, and we were working with coal miners. And these coal miners go to work in the dark, they work in the dark, they leave in the dark. I mean, basically, if you're going to have somebody that has seasonal affective disorder or SAD, it's going to be these guys. And what we found was that after we first had to get them off alcohol, because I was amazed at like 90% of them would drink before they'd go to work. Once we got them off alcohol, they started sleeping. We had a 70% sleep score improvement over the course of 6 weeks. And we did this with just the app, and we did it with, that means just sound, and we did it with light and sound to see what the difference was. And what we found is that it took about 6 weeks for the sound only group, which means they were using the binaural beats, isochronic tones, and the solfeggio frequencies and things to get them into that state. While the people with the headset, which uses light, what we call retinal flashing and ear lights, when they use that, it took only about 2.5 weeks to get to the same result. And once they started sleeping, which the key to sleep is not the length of time in bed. This is a misconception that's out there in the world. When we do our sleep studies, and we've done a lot of them, that's the main thing that our technology improves in people, because it downregulates the stress hormones and prepares the body for sleep. We have what we call delta sessions, which put you into that deep state. And what we found was that when you do that, when you downregulate that, the body is more prepared for sleep because we hold a charge. So when you think about, I don't know if you've done any research into earthing, but like Clint Oper, who's a friend of mine, did the earthing thing. What we find is when you balance the hemispheres, you also discharge energy, just like you would if you're walking outside barefoot. And we can actually measure the energy in the body. So we should be at 0 point. There should be no interference. But most people are running around with 1 to 3 volts of energy just surging through their body. So when you quiet the mind, balance the hemispheres, the body actually gets rid of that excess, really, information, because we're information at its very core, 99.999 whatever percent solid. The rest of us is information. And so what we're doing is we're tuning up that information with a field of very specific light and a field of very specific sound. And when the brain matches that sound, so the listener understands a little bit more, maybe if you and I, Stephan, were on a spaceship moving toward Earth, and we could bring Earth into the viewfinder and measure the frequency of the Earth, it would have different frequencies depending upon where you're at on the Earth, from 0.01 to 100. For instance, the volcano that is going off, that's at 100. So, but there's dead zones on the planet too that have a frequency of 0.05. So we have all this. Now, most of the time when we're sitting near the ocean, it's a 10 hertz frequency. So we get that alpha response, that acetylcholine release, which is a neurotransmitter. Or when we're in the mountains, we would get a 7.8 hertz hit, which is a theta release. Now, what's important about those two brain waves, and that's the main two brain waves we train to at BrainTap, although we train every brain wave, but those are the main, because what we find is if you don't have alpha, you're going to have a lot of fear and uncertainty, because that's your intuitive mind. So if you're not intuitively gathering, and this happens from the brain through the, when you look at the brain architecture, we are taking information from short-term to long-term memory and long-term to short-term memory all day long. And at the speed we do that, they call this neuroplasticity. So if you don't have the speed, you start to lose your memory, your focus, your concentration, you get anxiety, depression, fear. And that's why the other study that I want to talk about is that's really blowing the minds of the professors that we're working with is the Dementia Study. We had in a 6-week study, and we don't have time to go through it all, but just to give you the high points, we had a 49% neuroplastic change in 6 weeks, which is unheard of. And we took people that were on the dementia scale, We took them off the dementia scale in 6 weeks because they practiced 3 times a day using the technology. And then when the biggest score, I think the biggest improvement that we found was the reorganization score. Because the faster your nervous system can reorganize, meaning you can move from the parasympathetic to the sympathetic to the neurohormonal, because think of the neurohormonal like your backup generator. Most people are running around using their backup generator, and most people spend all their time repairing the backup generator, which means they spend all their time with supplements, building their bodies, getting it all optimized. But then they forget the most important thing to optimize is the brain, because if you don't have the right brain waves and you're not relaxed, all those great supplements are just going to flush down the toilet, just like your medical doctor was trying to tell you. But if you are in a relaxed state, so what we did, we had a group in, and this will be the last study, then we can move on. But we did a study with a group in Provo, Utah. So we were talking about the most important thing to realize about brain function is what we call the reorganization score. So when you think about the reorganization score, we all know people that they get upset in the morning and they're still upset 3 days later. They just haven't been able to reorganize around that event. And I always tell people, it's like what Mike Tyson said. He goes, everybody has a plan until they get hit. So we need to prepare, because we're all going to get hit at some point. Something's going to happen. We have to prepare for our eventual future and what's going to happen. And some people deny. And then when it happens, they're shocked. And then their nervous system gets locked. And when that nervous system gets locked, we like in a negative way or a positive way, the body, there's something called heart rate variability that is very popular now. It's in rings, it's in watches, it's in all these. That can tell people if they're wondering, gosh, am I regulating correctly? Well, very simply, I mean, there are more sophisticated. We have a very sophisticated piece of technology called the Neuralink, where we can actually put it on somebody for 5 minutes. It runs a program, it runs a low-level current through the body, but we get a resistance reading on every cell of the body, and we can tell what organ, what part of the body is in resistance, and then it feeds us back the data we need. And what we find is that most people are operating in a high state of delta. And believe it or not, that's what makes serotonin. But most everybody has a deficit of serotonin. And the problem is they're producing too much. So too much is also just as bad as too little. And then they take pills that are called serotonin uptake inhibitors, such as Prozac and things of that nature. And so it holds that into the brain. Well, our brain is the most powerful pharmacy on earth. It can release up to, 54,000 different neurotransitions and peptides and everything that it can create with a simple thought. So when you think about your thoughts, you can produce healthy healing thoughts, and those produce healthy healing chemicals in the brain that wash down through the body and heal us. Or we can think negative, destructive thoughts, and they do the same thing, but in a negative way. So we really want to, so when you think about what the technology is designed to do is, we now know, because something called epigenetics, what's happening is it's actually affecting the 99% of a person. Every person on earth is changing every 40 seconds. Now it's infinitely changing, or there's a finite number because we have a finite number of cells, but every DNA strand has a burst of biophotic energy that rebraids your DNA based on the food you consume, the water you drink, the people you hang out with, and it moves along the fascia like fiber optics and reprograms or optimizes the system depending upon if you're doing things that are healthy or if you're doing things that are destructive. It starts to break it down. So no one is the same. When they mapped the human genome in 2003, they actually pretty much lied to us, because they couldn't map the human genome because only 1% stays fixed. 99% changes every 40 seconds. So we're basically, the ancients once said that our bodies are like stepping into a river. We never step into the same, like if you step into a river, you never step into the same river twice because it's flowing. The same is true with our nervous system and our biological system. We're always changing, adapting, improvising, and hopefully overcoming any shortcomings.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot of great research, sounds like, at braintapresearch.com, you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. We'll include all the links that you share in the show notes for this episode, so the listener will be able to go to that after listening. So let's dive in a bit more into some of these things that you talked about. For example, the balancing the hemispheres. So what is the benefit of balancing the hemispheres? And I know a little bit about this. I've actually experienced Dave Asprey's 40 years of Zen program, which is a week-long neurofeedback intensive training. And I remember hearing these gongs that would go off when the left and right hemispheres were in synchrony. And apparently my kind of subconscious part of my brain wanted more of that, so would aim to get more gongs going. Now, you couldn't consciously make your hemispheres balance or synchronize, but subconsciously it worked, and it got us into more of a state of alpha and more theta. And I'm curious to hear more about this balancing of the hemispheres, and also about the differences in alpha brainwave state and theta brainwave state in terms of the benefits.
Okay. Well, yeah, the balancing is important. They also call it coherence. So as we're awake and moving through our day-to-day life, our left hemisphere should be just slightly faster than our right. If it is, then we can have a conversation, we can drive our cars, we can do everything. If it's even off a millisecond, then it starts doing what's called neural parsing, which means that it starts to disconnect those neuron activity, because we think at the speed of light and sound and thought. So our brain processes information, and it processes across the hippocampus. And this part of the brain is so important because it's transacting information from both hemispheres, but it's organizing it in different spaces. Most people don't realize, when I think of thought, like if I ask you to think of a fire truck, to think of that fire truck, you lit up, 6 to 8 places in your brain. And so you brought in association, you brought in sounds, you brought in smells, you might even thought of the dog in the seat, all those things. Your brain recreated those things. Now, if your brain was not coherent, or at least close, and we're talking about milliseconds, then let's say that the memory of that fire truck wasn't important. So the memory is still there, just like the hard drive. All the notes are there, all the files. But let's say that the file allocation table, the FAT table, gets corrupted. Well, that doesn't mean the files aren't there. It just means you can't get to them. So think of neural sparsing or parsing like you need to defrag the hard drive so you can get access to these memories. And most people are never trained to do that. So what we can do is we can speed up one hemisphere. Now, alpha is super important in cognition. Okay, so when we think about the frontal lobe, this is the part of the brain, that separates us from the animals. The people will tell us that the primitive brain has hijacked our reality because we're so fearful, stressed out, whatever, and this is causing a lot of negatives. And some people might feel like their body's turned against them because it's not cooperating, but it's really has to do with frequency and how the body is settling. So the alpha, especially as we age, is super important, because if there's a mismatch in alpha activity in the frontal lobe, that's a good sign that you're going to get dementia very quick. And if you don't do something about it, it's going to actually accelerate into full-blown Alzheimer's typically. Now, the good news is, we do it with light, sound, and vibration, but I had 2 papers published this year in PubMed where we did it with Kriya breathing. So you can also activate the frontal lobes, because I'm always looking at ancient traditions and how can I take those ancient traditions and make them modern technology. So what we did is we have a guy, Pavel, who's pretty famous out there in breathwork, and we had him put together a series of sessions now for breathwork while people are using our BrainTap technology, so that we can the key is you can't have and use breathwork or pills or anything, but you can't have the pill without the skill. So you can do breathwork, but if you don't generalize that and get it to actually become a meaningful part of your future technology in your own brain, which means future pacing, then the brain just thinks that's just a nice experience. So we want to train the brain to do more of that. And when you get out of sync, once you can't consciously do it, like you said, but you will feel, once you tune into your own physiology, you'll know when you're not. You'll know that, hey, my mind's not so sharp. And that's the whole point with the gongs. And so what we did, I I can only give you the example with Muse because I'm the dean of brain-based medicine too at Quantum University. So we bring out some pretty big names out to Hawaii. Used to be every 2 years, but now we've been on delay for the last 2 years. But we brought out Dr. Randy Cole, who's really big on neurofeedback, biofeedback, and using inexpensive devices. Because we have like the Wavi device at our clinic, we have the NeuroInfinity, we have one called the New Mind. These are all between $12,000 and $30,000 machines, and the average person isn't going to go buy them. So, but the Muse you can, and so we like the Muse because it gives you some pretty good data. And what happened in front of the group, he brought somebody up there, and when you get to alpha and your brain is balanced on the Muse, you hear a bird. That's the way they do it. So you can, and we had one of our students go up on stage in front of a few hundred people, and she bombed. She only got, like, in a 10-minute time period, she only got like 8 birds, which is really kind of sad, and we picked somebody who meditated. Actually thought, we would see a better result. So I said, you know what, let me take her outside. I'm going to do something with her. I'm going to bring her back. So Randy, he kept talking up there. I took her outside. I had her do an alpha session on BrainTap. She went back in, not even 20 minutes later. It was only a 10-minute session. She went back in and she got 48 birds. And he said, how did she do that? I said, well, you just wanted her to go to alpha. So I trained her brain to go to alpha. And as long as she can remember that feeling, she can beat your machine. We've had people now, in fact, I've got over 200 birds in a 10-minute time period because you can wear it while you're doing the brain tap. We've done just different experiments with it. So neurofeedback or biofeedbacks are good training methods to get you to understand that you can control them subconsciously, like you're saying, but everything is controlled by the subconscious. Most people don't realize when Bruce Lipton says your conscious mind is controlling only 5% of your reality and your subconscious is taking care of the rest. I mean, all you got to do is look down at your body and say, hey, who's beating my heart? Who's controlling my breath? Who's changing those 50,000 cells per second? Who's digesting that food? It's your subconscious, that superpower that's within you. And if we can tune into that superpower, life becomes easy, or at least easier. If we don't and we deny it, it becomes stressful, in that way. So the biggest difference between alpha and theta is alpha is more of an intuitive consciousness. You can actually function in your everyday life in alpha. In fact, they claim that Einstein operated at 10 hertz frequency all the time, which would be very unusual. And you have all the brain waves all the time. If you don't have a good balance of brain waves while you're awake, there's a big difference between the waking brain and the sleeping brain. The awakened brain should be about 45% beta, about 30% alpha, and 10% theta. And then, or at least that's what has been shown. And Ann Weiss, who was one of our, we used her with Light and Sound Research, and she wrote the book, The Master Brainwave. So she went out and did all the brain scans, actually more than even Dr. Amen, who's done brain scans differently, with SPECT scan technology.
Right.
But alpha can be attainable by everyone. I mean, you can use music. In fact, they call it the Mozart effect. So you can put on classical Baroque music when you sit and relax. It will actually balance the hemispheres of the brain and actually make you smarter. Now, the problem is we just did a study where we did a 45-minute session where we took that music and we had 15 minutes of just music, 5-minute washout. And then we had that same music, but we put our encoding in the background because we wanted to see what happens to the brain. So we're doing this in live readings with HRV and EEG. And what we found was that when they listen to music, yes, they got what they call the Mozart effect. We got deep alpha training and all of that. But what we did with the encoding is we did theta training. You can't get to theta on your own. Very few people can, unless you've been meditating a long time or you're using some other technology to do it. There are other technologies. We're not the only one. And so what we did when we had that same piece of music, at the end of the first piece of music, their stress went right back. Their brain went right back to its what we call the default mode network. It went right back to its original state. When we did that same piece of music, but we put the encoding in it with theta, we had a deeper experience. And at the end of the session, it didn't go back. It basically stayed. And what we want to do is we want to train to that perfect brainwave. Now, that study is also being done in Brazil, and they have 150 students in that study. And we're about 4 weeks into a 6-week study, and we're just seeing if people just do the music alone, can they affect a change over time? And then, of course, people are using the equipment. And, we're finding that just like we saw in our pilot study, that people who use the encoding are getting better brain. We call it brain fitness because, you think about when Jack LaLanne and Arnold Schwarzenegger and them all started talking, pushing muscle growth. I was around then, and people were talking about that being stunning your growth. Like, you shouldn't build muscle. Like, everybody today would think that's crazy. But back in the 70s, my high school didn't even have a workout room. I mean, if you did push-ups, set-ups, pull-ups, you did all the old, I remember when they started bringing in weights and people thought, what are you going to do with those? And of course, my uncles that lived in Iowa thought that was just crazy that we were going to start working out because they were on the farm, doing all the farm work. And of course, they were super strong. So we live in a whole different reality right now. Really, I mean, the way that we have to train our brains, I think neurofeedback and what we call brainwave entrainment should be a part of everybody's life because you have to know what's going on in there because your sanity. Now, theta, when we think about theta is the most underserviced brainwave in the adult population. And we've seen some people with very little. Now, in children, it's alpha, but in adults, it's theta. And theta is super important because theta is the brainwave that it basically instructs the gut to make GABA. GABA is a precursor to DMT. Now, I'm not saying you're going to take DMT as a supplement or something like that, but your brain creates DMT. So we have cannabinoid receptors as well. And when you get into theta, you actually start to trigger these receptors. So it basically stimulates your dreams. So if somebody out there is saying, I don't dream, well, I'm going to tell you, I could do a scan on you. You don't have theta. Because everybody who has high theta has vivid dreams, lucid dreams. And that's normal for us. Dreams are part of the natural way to stay sane because we can work out, like the great inventors, we can work out solutions to problems. We can visualize our future. We can release some stress and tension from the day. But if we never get a chance to do that, we still have all that pinned up stress and tension. And unfortunately, most people don't sleep well. And it's really because they don't have enough theta, not because they don't have enough delta. It's because the theta hasn't produced the right neurochemical bank account. And one thing that we're super excited about here is the Brazilian government actually, with their own money, $250,000 is doing a full-blown, double-blind, placebo-controlled study with BrainTap to prove that we're a digital drug. Because we've shown that we upregulate 54 different neurotransmitters and downregulate the stress hormones. And they want to be able to prescribe it and actually make it a part of they have a socialized medicine system, but they want to give people BrainTap instead of supplements, especially for pain control, because we've shown such a great result with helping people with pain.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, this is kind of an aside, but I think it might lead to some fascinating discussion. I have a friend who has a disorder called aphantasia. So he cannot conjure images inside his head. And he's had this his whole life. It was not until fairly recently that it was diagnosed. So he just thought he was normal, right? We're all normal until somebody tells us, like, you know what, you can't differentiate between these different colors, so you have color blindness or whatever. So how does that relate to all the research that you've been looking into, and how somebody could, if he wanted to, reduce the symptoms of aphantasia?
Well, we've never done anything specific with that, so I'm just going to tell you in general what we would do. So if I looked at his brain scan, or if we did a study with him, a case study, we'd probably see that theta brainwave is not very strong. And we also find gamma, which is now the newest brainwave on the block, and people are all talking about it. We actually went to MIT. I would think that with him, if we activated more gamma, then gamma seems to be the reorganizational frequency. It's like the bass drum, 40 hertz. It's like the bass drum of a band. It keeps everything else in order. And the more gamma we have, it seems the more creativity, the more spontaneous. You have these lucid dreams. We did a study with a doctor in Texas. His name is Dr. Rosenthal. and he wanted to do a psilocybin study for PTSD. And so we had some of the vets didn't want to take the psilocybin, which I can understand. They might have been addictive to some other things, and they didn't want to, be addicted to psilocybin. So I said, Dave, go ahead and do some scans on people while they're doing a psilocybin. Let's see what their brain's doing. And it was fascinating to me because we saw this high raise of gamma while they were going on these trips. They were just, when people say they were tripping, well, when you're in that high state of gamma, we see that with healers, or we see it with highly creative people. When somebody's a creative person or somebody's a healer, they generate these high frequencies of gamma. And now we know that the Buddhist adepts that are meditating, they're doing that. They're also generating this. So we stimulate gamma now. And we went to MIT where Lou Tai did the research on blue light therapy at 40 hertz frequency, breaking down amyloid plaque. Unfortunately, she just did it with mice. That was published. So when we visited her, I said, have you ever done this with people? She said, oh, no, that's what the $10 million is for. And I said, and luckily our CEO knows the guy who runs the brain lab there. And we left him with a couple of headsets. I said, well, we've shown that with this little headset that we're able to increase gamma by 23%. She goes, well, that'd be fascinating because we've only been able to raise it by 6%. And that's with a $10 million room that flashes blue light at 10 hertz frequency. So now she validated what we said. BrainTap can increase gamma. And what we're finding is that then it reorganizes the brain. So I know that at any age, any brain can change. Now, if they have an organic problem, something happened, or they have a birth defect, I can't make people, or the BrainTap can't make people, if they never saw the colors. I've never heard anybody doing that. But what it is there's all the stress and anxiety that comes along with it, with any disease or disorder. And if you can minimize that, now the body, which is self-healing, and there's a saying, we need to get rid of the thoughts, traumas, and toxins around any illness, and then the body can heal itself. So if they're thinking about it as poor, they're going to create toxic thinking. They might even start eating poorly because of stress and anxiety. We want to balance out the nervous system so they have the best chance to live their best life now. That's kind of the key. And we've seen some incredible things in the lab. I can't wait to get our results back because we've already done studies for anxiety, stress disorders, and things of that. But now with the major university doing this, I think we're going to be able to make some deeper claims once we get those results back, because we've seen magic happen. And I can't think of a condition that somebody, once they balance their brain, and they have to do the 3 steps. I always say there's 3 waves to wellness. First, you can't outthink a bad diet. So you've got to eat healthy, be healthy. I don't know anybody who can do that. Number 2 is you got to get your body moving and breathing and building muscle. If you don't do that, you're going to start to mentally decline. And then, but all 3 of these have to happen at the same time, really, because you also have to exercise the brain and get those brain waves going. Now, you can do this on your own, like we talked about before. You can go sit by the ocean for 20, 30 minutes, an hour a day. You can take a trip to the mountains and get into theta, or you can use technology and just do it from the comfort of your own home. That's the big difference.
Yeah, awesome. Now, I've shared this on my podcast before, so I'll just very briefly explain to you that when I got my first spiritual awakening in 2012, it was from a monk who changed his state to, like, he was unrecognizable. He looked completely different when he was in this mode versus when he was just normally, conversing with people and so forth. So he was in this high vibration mode, maybe fully gamma or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what was going on inside his brain, but he was I don't know, in a very powerful state. And then he touched me on the head, gave me what's known as a Deeksha, a oneness blessing. And I had what I equate to an LSD trip. I've never had any drug experiences before, so I can't really equate it really to an LSD trip. But everything was in Technicolor, very vibrant greens and everything. When I went outside, it was like a cartoon. It was incredible. And I felt this deep, deep sense of peace. I guess I was in gamma, perhaps, although I didn't have my brain scanned at that time either. But it opened me. It changed my entire life. And it was just in that short moment of him touching me on the head. So I'm curious to hear what your take is on this from a brain science perspective.
Well, also the physiology of the body. We now know that the brain emits infrared light. I mean, we all, you know, Tom Brady is, right? You know, the athlete.
Yeah.
He has a product called TB12. Well, our science officer actually designed the clothing that Tom Brady wears. It has ceramics in it that actually reflect back infrared light. We all have, you know, we all know the healing, or at least most people know the healing of infrared light. Well, our body produces it. They've also shown that people who are in these higher vibrations of gamma and peace and harmony, gratitude and love, like this Buddhist adept or whatever, he's actually sharing over 200 times more light than the average person. You got dosed with a high frequency. Now, our brain has cilia on it, little hair-like follicles on the brain. And that's what's going to match. That's why they call it frequency following response. Our brain is always matching its environment. It's also matching people. So when you went near him through biophotic exchange, now this is happening even when they're not a Buddhist adept. So that's why it's important the people you hang out with, because birds of a feather flock together. But when you get around some of these high vibration spiritual beings, you actually change. And if he touched you, he knows how to transmit energy, which I'm sure he did. That's what he did. He gave you this oneness blessing. You tuned into the oneness of the universe. In the reality, the underlying fabric of all things is consciousness. There's nothing else. Everything else they would tell you is a shadow dance. So we have this dance, and I've had many experiences, and I'm very fortunate that I get to go to India when it's open, because we work with 4 of the major universities in India. And so I get to work with a lot of these gurus and get to see their brains operate, and some that aren't really gurus that are, you know, you can tell the pretenders, because the reality is that like the Maharishi, when the Beatles gave him all those drugs and he went under the blanket for about an hour, came back out and he said, and there was enough LSD, it should have killed an elephant. He says, well, that'll get you to the doorway, but it won't get you to the table. He said, if you really want to do it, let me show you how to do that. So these beings have done the work. You know, in America, I have a book cover that I created, which looks like the carnation chocolate milk, but it has a little Buddha meditating there, and it's a spoof, but it says 2 scoops to instant enlightenment, you know, and then it says just 2 scoops instant Buddha. You know, that's what people want. They want it, you know, and you have to do the work, and part of that work is it's a breath work. You know, when you do vibrational therapy like chanting, we now know that actually triggers the polyvagal system, the wandering nerve that really is the secret to health. So while you're chanting and you're doing these things, your body gets this vibratory frequency and it just tunes up your body and your body lights up. And so when you're around people like that, they raise your vibration. I always tell people, we know people that when they walk in the room gets a little darker. You know, we call those people energy vampires. There are people that come in and they just suck, and they don't do it on purpose. They just found out this is the way they get attention. You know, this is the way they get. But there's other people, and they walk in the room, people just want to be around. You know, they just want to feel that energy, and they don't know what it is. They don't understand it, but it's the vibratory frequency of that individual. That's why the one study that I'm still trying to find, they quoted it during a live presentation I was doing, and I haven't been able to find it, but they had the citation up on the board. You know, it's one of those seminars you go to, and I've been trying to locate it, but they showed that people in gratitude and love are 200 times more light is flowing from their heart center than the person who's in fear and greed and things like that. So, you just got to be open. I mean, you were blessed to have that done. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, the people wait their whole life to have those kind of experiences that happen. And, you know, when you're in my field, you get to meet some people doing that. And a lot of times that happens during a near-death experience. You know, people will have those kind of experiences and their whole life changes. They say if we can get one new thought into the brain, one new thought, the whole brain has to rewire. A constellation of changes at the neurological level happen, and you come out of that experience different. And that sounds like what happened to you, is that they were able to, like in words of today, they were able to change your blockchain. So now you're gathering, you now have a new order of thinking because you've experienced it. A lot of people get the book learning, but the experience is where the richness is.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been blessed to have very powerful experiences such as that. And yeah, it just keeps getting better and better. It's amazing. Let me actually share one more recent experience that I'd love to hear your brain science take on it. So I did 40 years of Zen, as I said, in Seattle for a week, maybe a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And I had some memories surface, memories from my childhood that I had not had since my childhood. That was really amazing. Much of my childhood was not pleasant, so I intentionally, I guess, blocked it off, at least at the subconscious level. And these were positive memories of my childhood, so I was very, very grateful for that. Well, that hadn't happened since. I haven't gone back to do 40 years of Zen. I did some kind of weekly neurofeedback sessions at Andrew Hill's facility, Peak Brain Institute. Dr. Andrew Hill was also a past guest on this podcast. So that was cool. It was helpful in terms of stress reduction and sleep and things like that, but it didn't unlock memories from my childhood. And I had a recent experience like a month and a half ago. Actually, I was driving back from the biohacking conference, Dave Asprey's biohacking conference, which you were also at. And that experience was incredible. I prayed for more childhood memories, positive childhood memories to come to me as I was driving. Everyone else was asleep in the car, and I couldn't play music because I just didn't want to wake anybody. So I was just, by myself, basically, in my thoughts. And I decided I'm going to have a conversation with God, and it was really amazing. And then at one point I asked for some memories from my childhood, and they came flooding in. It was incredible. I'm going to start crying now. It's just, I can't, I can't even put it into words. It was really, really powerful. So I'm curious what, from your brain science perspective, did you think was going on there?
Well, when you're in a state of beta or stress, you've actually using up so much energy. You don't have the capacity to visualize, imagine, because think about it. You don't want to be thinking alternative thoughts if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And these bodies really haven't changed in 200,000 years. So the physiology hasn't changed. So our access to those memories. But when you're at 40 years of Zen, you're in and out of those alpha states all day long. So you've created so much acetylcholine, so much GABA that now you're hallucinating, like somebody you're getting high in your own supply. In other words, when you're driving down the road, it's not unusual to be driving in alpha. So that long drive, all the time you're in alpha, you're continuing to produce that. And then, depending upon how close you were to even being tired enough to sleep, you were keeping yourself awake. So you were basically keeping yourself in that alpha theta rhythm while you were driving. So you got access to those, basically that GABA response, that DMT response. All the memories are there. When they've done brain surgeries where they've opened up the brain and they've touched different regions of the brain, and people will have full sensory memories. I mean, memories of things that they didn't even think they recalled because they were things that were happening in a room they were in, that basically your brain, to give everyone an idea, your ears are always collecting 25,000 pieces of information every second, but we usually only act on 40 of them. Our eyes are collecting over 2,000 pieces of information every second, but we only act on less than 40 of them. So our brain actually becomes a screener, and our brain uses a lot of energy. So to remember these memories are good, but it still takes energy. So it depends on, so that's why when you settle down, you relax, you start getting into alpha and theta through a meditation process, why these memories come flooding back. What I recommend people do Every night when you go to sleep, this is a practice I've been doing since I was a kid, and I still do it every night. When I'm lying in bed, I don't try to go to sleep. That's probably the worst thing for most people. When you try to go to sleep, you kind of fight against yourself, especially if you have an issue, and you don't want to fall asleep right away. There's a period of time where alpha and theta becomes its strongest. It's first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And what I tell them to do is make a review of your day. And in that review, think of the one or two positive things that happened to you, make them colorful, bright, put a soundtrack in the background, and then add them to your success reel. So you start going back in time, remembering every memory. And as you go back through every memory, you go back to the earliest memory. What'll happen, it's like beads on a string. Those other memories will show up because they're connected. There's not one thought that isn't connected to another thought. So, all those memories are there. And when you revive them, or they call it revivification in psychology, you make them real. Now, when you take a negative memory, if it shows up, what's blocking those positive ones is a few disappointments. And these are normal in life. Nobody's had the storybook life like Disney, that I know of. But it depends on how we reorganize after that. So you take the negative memories, you make them black and white. You think about, hey, how did that make me stronger? How did that make me enjoy my life better? Because those negative experiences make the positives that much sweeter if you put them in the right perspective and you don't dwell on them. But we have to organize that way. And if you do that, you'll find that these memories, like beads on a string, will come up, and you'll have your own little success reel, and use that energy, because that energy will never diminish. Those are powerful states. Of course, in NLP and therapy, we would want you to, that's like your treasure chest. Whenever you start to feel bad or something's going on, those are the memories you're going to go get, because that's going to trigger that great pharmacy that you have between your ears and get you feeling good again.
Awesome. Well, I know we're getting close to time, so one more question before we wrap up, and then we'll have you share, contact info and how to get the BrainTap. But this truism of your thoughts create your reality is something a lot of spiritual gurus and just people who are spiritual will tout, and I believe it to be true. I would love to hear your perspective from your powerful brain science research and all that. Yeah.
Well, in quantum physics, they have something they call a strange attractor. And that means that what you focus on is attracting things to it. So just use the example of buying a new car. You drive the car off the lot, then you start seeing them everywhere. You didn't see them before that because it wasn't the top of the mind awareness. So when they're talking about creating your reality, there is heaven and hell here right now. And you can choose to live in heaven or you can choose to live in hell. We can't change the way the stars and sun set in the sky, but we can change our attitude about it. So that's what we're talking about and so if people realize opportunities come all the time, even my opportunities in life, if I wasn't open to those possibilities, I'll give one example. I was sitting with my dad back in the 80s, and I said, you know what? We really need somebody to help us out. This is the way therapists talk. We're the greatest in the world. All we need is money, right? And that's not true, but that's what we were talking about. Well, we get a call from Dr. Paul Adams. He wants to put in a clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. My dad tells him no. He hangs up the phone. I said, Dad, what did you just say? He goes, well, we're doing our own thing. We don't want to work with Dr. Adams. I said, do you mind if I call him? Well, long story short, we did a business with him. I bought that practice back in 3 years for $9,000, built 108 locations using positive changes as the cornerstone. If I wouldn't have taken that call and been there and open to that possibility, who knows what I would have done. But when opportunity knocks, you have to see it as opportunity. You can't just say, it can't be your own. And I'm a big believer in looking outside myself for solutions, but verifying within myself that it's good for me. So there's a difference. I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I want to associate myself with really smart people that can help me out and technologies that can help me. We live in a beautiful time right now. And I think that most people just don't see the opportunity that's right before them. And it's as simple as, like in this case, it's as simple as pressing play and making a change in your life. It doesn't take a lot. The technology has made it so simple. And I think people like Dave Asprey, I mean, we were doing things like this in the 80s, but it takes people like Dave Asprey that are willing to be out there, be outspoken, put these things together, find out what works for him, like the 40 years of Zen, and then keep people realizing, that there is something here, and then sharing it with the world. A lot of people keep all their great secrets under a bushel basket, like you're sharing this, and the other people you have on the show, they're sharing their wisdom and knowledge so we can improve the human condition. And I think that's commendable.
It is. It is indeed. Well, thank you for all you do and all the light you reveal in the world and all the people that you help. Now, if our listener wanted to learn more and maybe follow you on social media, maybe read some of your wisdom and watch some trainings and things like that, and best yet, even to buy the product BrainTap, which my wife bought. She tried your device at your booth at the biohacking conference in September, and she loved it. So she bought the headset and the subscription, and yeah. So where do we send our listener or viewer to?
Well, they can follow me on social media at Dr. Patrick Porter. So at Dr. Patrick Porter, they can find me there. And then at BrainTap Tech, we're kind of commingled, of course, because you can't separate me really. But my website is drpatrickporteras.com, and all the links are there where you can go to all the research projects we're doing. I think the biggest thing they can do is just use it. It's one of those things where it's like explaining atmosphere to a fish. We need to get people in the water swimming and realizing that it works. So they can go to braintap.info. So it's braintap.info. And for free, you can download a copy of my book, Thrive and Overdrive. You get to keep the book whether you do anything at all with us. It's a digital book, so you can put it into your Kindle reader. And then you get 15 days on our app that will let you explore some of the different, like how to wake up in the morning through digital coffee, how to go to sleep by getting into deep delta, and how to reset your natural biorhythms in the middle of the day using the theta program. So they can have fun with it, play with it. And then at 15 days, if they decide to do something, then they buy a subscription. If they don't, it just goes away. No credit card necessary.
Awesome. Well, it's a great offer. And thank you so much, Patrick. This was very enlightening and inspiring. And I'm going to start using the BrainTap. I mean, it's just sitting in the other room when my wife's not using it. So I need to give it a try. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And I look forward to hearing how you do with it. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And listener, please take some action from this episode, even if you're not going to buy the product. Meditate more. Get out there and do something for your loved ones that is out of character and extra special. Get some gift or do some active service for the people you care about. And we'll catch you on the next episode. This is Stephan Spencer signing off.